Hey guys, I am Game Advisor and welcome back to another Icarus video. Today we're going to be talking about the new Icarus Week 9 content update. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. Now, as we look through here, let's see some of the more interesting things it has to offer. In addition to bug fixes and optimization, they seem to have worked on the farming quite a lot in this patch, so we're definitely going to talk about that. For the Week 9 update, we wanted to give farming some love, adding variations to crop growth times and yields, allowing players to farm with more thought. Long-term, high-yield crops can be helpful to players spending large amounts of time away from base, while shorter time, shorter yield crops might be useful for someone spending a long time at their home. We've also added more information to tooltips on farming plots and their crops. Now, I'm just going to say this before we go any further. I'm glad that farming's getting some love. It's definitely needed in this game. I'm really glad they're putting that in. I just want the devs, if you do happen to hear this, to understand that right now with the way your mission structure works, there's very little incentive to grow things. So unless they've reduced the growth time to like 5 to 10 minutes or less on some of these crops, most people still won't bother growing anything. Anyways, let's continue. This sets the groundwork for even more farming mechanics such as the greenhouse effects. Okay. Farming plots now track if they see the sky straight above them and whether they have glass buildables around them. Okay, I'm assuming the greenhouse they're referencing is the glass buildables. So if you build glass buildables around them, it doesn't matter if they're indoors because it's a greenhouse essentially, which would make sense. So it says with no sky visible and no greenhouse present, crops have a growth speed reduction of 50%. Perfect. I think that's how it should have been in the first place. There was no reason not to have that in. Growing crops using a greenhouse, regardless of seeing the sky directly or not. So again, I'm assuming they're talking about building a glass structure here. I don't think a greenhouse is a new item they've implemented. Maybe they will in the future, but at this point, I don't think that's what they're talking about. Will increase its growth rate by 50%. Okay, simple enough. Players can expect these systems to grow, pun intended, okay. Over time, as we introduce more intricate mechanics to engage with, expect to see multiple ways to water crops across all tech levels. Yes, please. This is something that I would actually find interesting, but again, we need a reason to care about growing crops in the first place. So it says that hydroponic trays will be a new way to boost growth for those that wish to invest in their farm's technology, and different fertilizers may alter growth patterns. Again, great, I'm glad farming's getting some love, but guys, we need a reason to care about farming. Unless there's a mission that specifically says you have to grow something, or they add like a crop in the game that can only be obtained through growing. Right now, I just don't see the value in growing things. I mean, it's so much easier to simply just go off on certain missions and collect the vegetables you need for them, rather than actually growing them and spending that full hour sitting there AFK. Additionally, we are also looking at biome-specific farming content. We want to reward players for exploring while also giving them the ability to grow crops in otherwise unfavorable environments. Certain crops may require certain conditions in order to grow, and it will be on you to facilitate those needs. Great. Again, I am looking forward to that. But once again, please just give us a good reason to care about farming at this point. Because at this point, I don't see a reason to even bother with it. It's one of the least useful features in the game at this stage. However, like I said, if they do make it useful, I definitely think it needs to get this love and much needed care before they actually make it useful, because otherwise it's going to actually hinder the game if they try to force people to farm but don't actually have a good farming baseline for how the game works. Because currently farming is pretty lackluster, even with these little updates they put in this week. Now, apparently they made some changes to the user interface here. This is supposed to make it easier to identify when insurance drops are a thing, which is great and all, but I never had this problem. So if you guys were struggling with it, I'm glad they put it in, but for me, it just was never an issue in the first place. Now, moving along here, they did have a little community highlights thing. We're not going to get into that, but let's go ahead and talk about the change log. They added a settings menu option to automatically skip the intro video. Yes, please. I just don't want to listen to the actual loading screen. I'm fine with it, honestly, though. They said they added building upgrade tool to support for all pieces and materials. Good. I know there was an issue where whenever you tried to upgrade a post or a support beam, whatever they're called, that it wouldn't actually work with the repair hammer. So good fix. Glad that's in. This is them just talking about the farming stuff we already went over. changed farming to be more dynamic by decreasing growth time and increasing yield rates for many crop types. So if this is each different crop has a different growth rate, you guys can be expecting to see a video in the near future of us talking about the different farming speeds. So I'll have to actually get in the game and test that out for you. I don't know if they're just saying that there's a 50% speed reduction and all that other stuff they talked about, or if they're saying each individual plant has its own speed. So if that is the case, we will most likely be making a video on that. The added mushrooms that can now be grown in crop plots, great. We already know they added mushrooms in the last patch, so I guess now we can plant them. Cool, no complaints there. Again, farming is just not super useful at the moment. I hope it gets more useful, but with that being said, it says they added some information to tooltips on farming plots. We'll have to take a look at that. Optimize the logic around plant growth, more farming stuff we really don't care that much about at this point in time. They changed the knife throw to require a higher minimum charge, which is great and all. I mean, I never had an issue of accidentally throwing my knife, but maybe that's just me. You guys can let me know yourself too down in the comments. I never ran into that, but you know what? If some people were accidentally throwing it, I don't mind an extra 0.1 second or 0.2 or 3 second charge time just to be safe for those people. Fixed an issue preventing fish from spawning in the outpost. Great. And it seems like the majority of what we have left here is just an assortment of different bug fixes. They added some new loading screens. But one thing I do want to point out here is they fixed the wine giving the incorrect buff when consumed, and returning the wrong empty vessel for reuse. If you guys actually didn't know about this one, if you have beer and the wine recipe and you make both of them, they both give you the beer buff. So I'm assuming wine is supposed to be its own separate buff, which is actually a big game changer for some of these late game missions when you're already going to be farming up those materials, and you can have another drink that's going to give you even more energy regeneration. So I'll have to test this one out. Once I find out, I'll let you guys know in the comments. Otherwise, if you guys have already figured this one out, feel free to let us know. And it does say they fixed some other random little bugs and issues here. They fixed the consume stack option for carrots. If you guys ran into that, I know I've noticed that you actually couldn't right click consume stack on carrots, but again, I was never super concerned with that in the first place. And well, honestly guys, I think this update was definitely pretty important. I'm glad farming is getting a look at, and definitely glad it's getting an overhaul. I think they're taking a step in the right direction here, but I definitely feel a little underwhelmed when we compare it to last week's patch. So hopefully the devs will still please. Once again, guys, the biggest thing I can ask for from the devs, and I know some of you may disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. We don't all have to agree, but please just give us some way to respec. I want a balanced way in the game for it to happen repeatedly, but at this stage, there are so many players that just aren't playing the game and will not come back until they put it in. So I really would love to see them implement that so that people start returning to the game and people don't quit when they get high level. I don't want to see this game die simply because people didn't know that your spec is locked in once you hit level 40. I've seen a ton of people complaining about this in the comments, not just on my videos, but also in the comments of the actual update itself. So once again, devs, if you happen to watch this by some odd chance, please, I don't care how we do it at this stage. My suggestion is just have it set up so that you can have a one-time only for every character above level 40 that's currently in the game, or everybody that has already made their character can have one free respec, because it's taken so long and so many players have basically stopped playing your game because of this. And then you can implement it properly in a few weeks or in a month once you figure out a balanced system. You guys have been saying you were going to implement this since basically day one, and we still don't have it. So again, I'm not trying to be mean here. I love your game, but if we could have anything from y'all, I would love to see us have some kind of respec implemented into the game, however you decide to do that. With all that being said though, thank you all so much for watching this video. I'm Game Advisor, and for more Icarus and other survival game content, consider subscribing to our channel. Otherwise, thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you next time.